All right, the divided kingdom. Last week we talked mainly about Rehoboam and the reasons for his fall from power and out of favor with God were several. Of those, we saw that he built the high places. Now, this is the southern kingdom who's supposed to know God. He decided he's going to build a high place. Well, that's asking for trouble. You found that in 1 Kings 14, verse 22 to 24. I'm not going to read it, but that's where it is if you're taking notes. The other main reason is found in 2 Chronicles 12. He forsook the law of his God. So when you forsake God, just expect trouble. I mean, that goes hand in hand. The next thing he did was in 2 Chronicles chapter 12, verse 14. It says he prepared not his heart to seek the Lord. Okay, he forsook God, he forsook the law, and he would not prepare his heart to seek God. So in seeking God, there's a preparation that man has to do all his own. You don't just open the Bible and suddenly God speaks to you. You prepare yourself for it. You say, okay, I'm going to submit to whatever I find here, and God, you're in charge, tell me what to do. Unless a man will do that, he's not prepared to hear from God. All right, so now with the lesson. We've seen Rehoboam in the south, Jeroboam in the north. When Rehoboam dies, his son takes over, Abijah. Abijah. There's two spellings, Abijah or Abijam. But while this is happening, Jeroboam in the north is still in power. So we'll find Abijah. He'll be in 1 Kings 15. The spelling is either Abijam, Abijam, or Abijah. Abijah or Abijam is going to rule for 3 years. Be 1 Kings chapter 15, and we'll see it in verse 1 and 2. 1 Kings 15, verse 1 and 2. It says, now in the 18th year of King Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, reigned Abijam over Judah. 3 years reigned he in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was, how do you say that? What? Mayaka. That's a weird sounding name. The daughter of Abishuam. Okay? You find the same thing. It's going to tell us basically the very same thing, that he reigned for 3 years. Who his mom is, that name we can't pronounce. You'll find that in 2 Chronicles 13, 1 and 2. You'll see 1 Kings and 2 Chronicles are going to carry a lot of the same information, and you'll see subtle differences here and there. His heart was not perfect with God. God notes that. He says, if a man is not going to be perfect with me, everybody needs to know it. So it's good for us to know that on the front end, so that when his life turns into disaster, we know why. In 1 Kings 15, verse 3. 1 Kings 15, verse 3. It says, and he walked in all the sins of his father, which he had done before him, and his heart was not perfect with the Lord his God, as the heart of David his father. David was the utopia everyone was trying to compare themselves to. If your kingdomship could attain to David, you had done something. Verse 4. Nevertheless, for David's sake, did the Lord his God give him a lamp in Jerusalem to set his son after him and to establish Jerusalem. So rather than God destroying him immediately, God says, look, I've made a promise to David. Even though this guy's not acting anything like David, I'm still, for David's sake, going to leave him on the throne. And the inference there is that it's not just David, it's a line of succession. And you'll see in the south, the line does hold all the way through. It's always a son of David, Solomon, all the way through. Verse 5. Because David did that which was right in the eyes of the Lord, and turned not aside from anything that was commanded him all the days of his life, save only in the matter of Uriah the Hittite. Now that's interesting to note, because David had many problems that are not noted. God overlooked some of them. Remember, he numbered the people. God got mad at him about that. But God didn't mention it here at the end of his life. He also, you'll find at the very end of his life, has a young woman that comes in and sleeps with him to give him warmth. I don't think there's anything sexual, but it's just wrong, okay? Just wrong. That's wrong, and God doesn't mention that here. There's a lot of things God overlooked in his life. There's no guarantee God's going to overlook anything. Now, he paid for it physically on this earth. When he did wrong, he paid for it. But as far as God was concerned, he overlooked it and counted it paid for in full. However, in the matter of Uriah, he never overlooked that. So there's some things you can get involved in. God holds a grudge. Man shouldn't be holding grudges, but God sure does, and he can. He's righteous. All right, the next thing about him is 2 Chronicles 13:3. 2 Chronicles 13:3. He does what all kings do. A good king, a good ruler, is not content to just sit in his little palace and talk to his handful of people. You got to get more and more. It's got to grow. So he goes to war. He goes to war against Jeroboam, and he defeats him. 2 Chronicles 13, verse 3. And Abijah set the battle in array with an army of valiant men of war, even 400,000 chosen men. Jeroboam also set the battle in array against him, with 800,000 chosen men, being mighty men of valor. And Abijah stood up upon Mount Zemaraim, which is in Mount Ephraim, and said, "Hear me." Now he's going to tell us some information. He's going to tell these people off. "Hear me, thou Jeroboam, and all Israel." So he's talking to everybody in the north. "Ought you not to know that the Lord God of Israel gave the kingdom over Israel to David forever?" He said there's one line of kings, and it should only come from David, and he's absolutely right. "Even to him and to his sons by a covenant of salt. Yet Jeroboam the son of Nebat, the servant of Solomon, the son of David, is risen up and hath rebelled against his Lord." So he says, what you've got here is just a slave who's taken the throne. And the rules are, it's supposed to be a royal line sitting on the throne. Verse 7, "And there are gathered unto him vain men." Now he's letting them have it. Everybody who's part of his party is just a vain man. "The children of Belial," you're children of the devil. He's not sugarcoating anything. "And have strengthened themselves against Rehoboam the son of Solomon. And Rehoboam was young and tender-hearted, and could not withstand them. Now ye think to withstand the kingdom of the Lord in the hands of his son David, in the hand of the sons of David, and ye be a great multitude." He said, do you think you're going to go up against something God set in place? And you got a bunch of people, so you think the majority is going to hold rule. "And there are with you golden calves." Well, what good is that going to do you? Really? I mean, really, what good's a trinket going to do you going into war? Now, I could understand it if you had you a bazooka or something. Now, we might brag about that a little bit. Or you got the atom bomb, but they're carrying golden calves. Well, that's history. They always fought in honor or at the behest of their gods, Israel included. Israel went against a foreign country because God said to do it. So God was the controller of it. But here they're doing something that's pagan. They're carrying in a pagan trinket to win the battle for them. Now we found Israel did that too. That's how they lost the Ark of the Covenant. When Israel decided that they wanted to start playing pagan, they took the Ark of the Covenant and lost it. They should have known pagan principles don't win the war. So here they go with the golden calves, which Jeroboam made you for gods. "Have you not cast out the priest of the Lord and sons of Aaron and the Levites, and have made you priests after the manner of the nations of other lands?" He said, you're a bunch of sissies. You're just mimicking what you've seen other people do. You cast out anybody who had any power. The nation of Israel had their own system, and they knew it. Nobody else was like them. He said, you cast them out, and then you're going around trying to be a copycat. The copycat is never as good as the real thing. That's why a Christian, if you're a Christian and you want to get involved in the world, you can. But you'll never have as much fun as the world does because you're a copycat. That's not who you are. So a Christian can get involved in the world and they can duplicate the world, but you're only going to have misery, more so than what the world does. And that's what we're going to find here. So that whosoever cometh to consecrate himself with young bullocks and 7 rams, the same may be priests to them that are no gods. He says the way you choose leaders is who's got money. If you got a lot of cattle and stuff you can consecrate, we'll say, hey, you must be religious. So it's done by an outward show, just like Christianity today is done by an outward show. If you can show proof that you're something spiritual with an outward show, we'll consider you something spiritual. That's pagan. The way you show it is by a good conscience toward God and man, by your actions without calling to be noticed. In verse 10, but as for us, there's a difference between the north and the south. I'm not just talking about in America. The Lord is our God. That indicates he was not theirs. And we have not forsaken him. The priests, which minister unto the Lord, are the sons of Aaron, the way it's supposed to be. And the Levites wait upon their business. And they burn unto the Lord every morning and every evening, burnt sacrifices and sweet incense. The showbread also, so forth, so on. He's going to go through and tell them, you know the system God put in place from the Old Testament, and we're still doing it. Now, they've modernized up north, and they've tried to become what their neighbors were because they looked around and said, hey, there's powerful nations out there. The way they're claiming their power is with these modern new gods. Verse 12, and behold, God himself is with us for our captain. That should be scary to them. They said, we've got the real deal. You've got a trinket, but we've actually got God as the captain. Big difference. Look at the end of the verse. He says, fight ye not against the Lord God of your fathers. He says, okay, you want to go to war, we can do it, but guess what? You're fighting against God, and that's probably not a good move, but we can have a fight. Verse 13, but Jeroboam caused an ambush to come about behind them. So they were before Judah, and the ambush was behind them. And when Judah looked back, behold, the battle was before and behind. They're trapped. And they cried unto the Lord, and the priests sounded with trumpets. And the men of Judah gave a shout, and as the men of Judah shouted, it came to pass that God smote Jeroboam and all Israel before Abijah and Judah. So they're trapped. We've been there. Your life has been there at some point. If it's not, just wait, tomorrow's coming. You've been trapped before. That's when God likes to save, when you get trapped. He says right here, they're trapped. They're trapped in the front and in the back. They ain't nothing they can do. They've just declared to everybody that God's the winner, and if you losers want to fight, come on, we'll whip you. And then all of a sudden they get trapped. So what do? Same thing we should do. They cried to the Lord. And it says, as they shouted, as the men of Judah shouted, God smote Jeroboam. So we don't need to say, I'll cry to you, God, once you fix this. Or let me figure out a way to handle this, and then I'll cry to God, or I'll get close to God. No. He starts working when you start asking. Look at verse 17. It says, and Abijah and his people slew with them, and Abijah and his people slew them with a great slaughter. There fell down slain of Israel 500,000 chosen men. I'd say it was a slaughter. They did some business. Abijah, that was a good start, but it didn't last long. 2 Chronicles 13:21. He falls into the same trap the other idiots have been doing all along. He multiplies wives. Now, I understand part of that was they multiply wives in an effort to have an heir, a male heir to the throne. However, there's no excuse for it. God had promised an heir to the throne. Just trust him. 2 Chronicles 13:21. But Abijah waxed mighty and married 14 wives and begat 22 sons and 16 daughters. Well, once he got the first son, he should have quit. I mean, that's what you were after, wasn't it? That's a bunch of women running around telling you what to do. Poor guy.
He probably needed that.
He couldn't figure out what was wrong in the house. Kept getting him another boss, another wife. He does that, and that starts to be his demise. 1 Kings 15, verse 7. He reigns for only 3 years. In 3 years, he's done a lot, though. 1 Kings 15, verse 7. Now the rest of the acts of Abijah and all that he did, are they not written in the books of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? And there was war between Abijah and Jeroboam. And Abijah slept with his fathers, and they buried him in the city of David, and Asa his son reigned in his stead. He reigns for 3 years. There's a phrase that we're given in that passage. You find it also in 2 Chronicles 13:2, that he has war all his days. All his days he's in warfare. Well, that's what a king's supposed to do. King's supposed to fight, and he fought, but he didn't last long. 3 years was it. So we've got Abijah in the south. Jeroboam is still reigning in the north. But Abijah is going to die, and up comes his son, Asa. Asa is going to reign in the south. Then shortly after Asa, Nadab will take over in the north. But for now, let's see Asa. Asa is in 1 Kings 15, verse 9. Asa comes to power 2 years before Israel in the north's first king dies. 1 Kings 15, verse 9. And in the 20th year of Jeroboam, king of Israel, reigned Asa over Judah, and 41 years reigned he in Jerusalem. So he's got a good long length of reigning. Matter of fact, he's going to reign 1 year longer than David did, or than Saul did, or than Solomon did. So we'll get a lot of information on this guy. Verse 10. And 41 years reigned he in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was that woman, the daughter of Abishuam. Okay, so he's going to reign for a good long while. Jeroboam, the first king in the north, is finally going to die. After 22 years of reigning over Israel, he dies. That'll be in 1 Kings 14, verse 19.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Real quick. It says here that Abijah's mother's name was Maacah, the daughter of Abisham.
Mm-hmm.
And then it says that Asa's mother's name was the same.
Mm-hmm. That's what it says. Do what?
Are they brothers?
No, I don't think they're brothers. I think it just means what it says.
Okay. Moving
Which
on.
is,
You're going to find issues like this in the Bible, where it's going to look like there's a contradiction. And you take one of two courses. You either say the Bible's wrong, there's a scribal error, that's called critical something, where you're critical text, critical of the text. We don't want to be critical of the text. We say the Bible says exactly what it means and means what it says. If there's a problem, we'll be critical with ourselves. So it probably means that's his grandmother, or it could be a brother. So either way, but I think it's probably a grandmother. They do the same thing. They'll call Jesus Christ is called the Son of David. He's not the son of David. How many generations are there? 3 times 14 before Jesus shows up. Okay, any descendant of a man is also called his son, the son. So they'll do the same thing here.
Thank you.
So where are we here? We're 1 Kings 14, verse 19. Jeroboam. Jeroboam's going to finally croak. Verse 19. The rest of the acts of Jeroboam, how he warred and how he reigned. Behold, they are written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel. Now, he got to reign a whole lot longer than these other guys did. Sometimes length of life is not a stamp of approval from God. Sometimes wicked people live for a long time. That's God's mercy is what that is. God's giving them mercy because once they die, there's no chance at having a do-over. There is no repentance after the grave that counts. Verse 20. And the days which Jeroboam reigned were 22 years, and he slept with his fathers, and Nadab his son reigned in his stead. So now we've got new kings in the north and the south. In 2 Chronicles 13:20. 2 Chronicles 13:20, we get a little more info on his death. Neither did Jeroboam recover strength again in the days of Abijah, and the Lord struck him, and he died. God decided enough's enough, and he killed him. God is responsible for everybody's death. I know that sounds like a harsh thing to say, but it's a fact. You'll find in Revelation, Jesus Christ shows up and he says, I am he that was dead and am alive, and have the keys of death and hell. If a person's going to die, it's going to be Jesus Christ that unlocks the door, both to death and to hell. A person doesn't go to hell unless Jesus Christ opens the door and says, this is where you belong. Now, a lot of people try to commit suicide, and a lot of people are successful. However, they didn't do that. Jesus Christ opened the door. He said, you want this? I'll give it to you. So that's 100% in Jesus' hands, according to the Bible. The same thing with hell. He has the keys of hell. Remember, he said, talking to Peter, he said, thou art Peter, and upon this rock, talking about himself, I'll build my kingdom, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. Well, they got a lock on them, and he had the key. That's why he could come out of the grave. Nobody else has the key. He ushers in a person to hell and locks it. There's no coming out. Now they do come up to our judgment, the great white throne judgment. All right, that's getting off the subject. We'll get back to these kings. Asa in the south, in Judah. He has peace for 10 years, something all these other kings wished they had. In 2 Chronicles 14, verse 1. It says, and Abijah slept with his fathers, and they buried him in the city of David. Asa his son reigned in his stead, and in his days the land was quiet 10 years. So we finally get some rest between north and south, but it's just short-lived. This is, when you have a long campaign of warfare, there's lulls where it's rest, but it's not really a rest as in there's peace. It's just somebody hit the pause button. They're regrouping. You're going to see this war is going to continue between north and south forever. Look at 1 Kings 15. Nadab, the northern kingdom, Jeroboam's son, comes to the throne. 1 Kings 15:25. And Nadab, the son of Jeroboam, began to reign over Israel in the second year of Asa, king of Judah. And he reigned over Israel 2 years. He didn't get very long. 2 years. So now we've got Asa in the south, Nadab in the north. And we're going to see a little info on them. Asa in 1 Kings 15, verse 11. Asa does something good. He cleans up the mess that was left him. Now we hear presidents claim this. This is a line I've heard a lot here lately. They inherited a mess. No, this was inheriting a mess. If the king before you set up high places, forsook God and the law and all that stuff, then you would have inherited a mess. Well, Asa does a good job. He's going to clean up the mess. Let's find him do it. 1 Kings 15:11. 1 Kings 15, verse 11. It says, and Asa did that which was right in the eyes of the Lord, as did David his father. Okay, well that's a compliment right there. When they compare you to David and say you were like David, they're saying you did a lot. Verse 12. And he took away the Sodomites out of the land and removed all the idols that his father had made. Okay, so he did two things. The very first thing he did that was noteworthy, commendable, is he got rid of the Sodomites. Okay, so when you start seeing Sodomites multiply, it's a sign you're in the wrong group. Your nation has gone the wrong direction. He says, we're going to clean this nation up. And if he's doing right in the eyes of God, God says, okay, here's what I'm going to tell you were right. These were the right things he did. Got rid of the Sodomites and removed the idols. These idols weren't just idols that the people had put up. They were idols his father had put up. So he had some strong stands here. Verse 13. And Maacah, am I saying that right? His mother, even her he removed from being queen, because she had made an idol in a grove. And Asa destroyed her idol and burned it by the brook Kidron. He wasn't playing. He said, I'm king. I don't care if you're my mom or my dad. If you did wrong, I'm cleaning it up. Now, if we just had some stands like that. Now, I'm not saying you have to be cruel to your mom and your dad. However, you should be willing to stand for God regardless of who is against it. Period. And he does some great things here. Now in the north, Nadab, the northern kingdom of Israel, he does evil. Well, we would kind of expect that. You're going to find the north is nothing but evil. Kind of like America. No. 1 Kings 15:26. 1 Kings 15:26, talking about Nadab. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord, and walked in the ways of his father, and in the sins wherewith he made Israel to sin. Now that's a scary prospect. He made Israel to sin. So the northern kingdom of Israel, just naturally we have as a flesh that's overpowering, and we got to fight it all the time. We've got to fight that sin. But this is not normal sin that an individual gets caught up in. This is the king, it says, wherewith he made Israel to sin. Yeah, when you make golden calves and you tell Israel, you're not going to the temple, you're coming up to my place to worship, and you're going to worship a God that is out of Egypt, yeah, that's making Israel to sin. Don't you know he had to pay dearly at the judgment for that? Asa in the south. Asa does something good. Asa's motto is making Judah great again. And he did. Judah had wound down, and he made it great again. He did. A great nation is not a great nation if it doesn't have a great army. And that you'll find all the way through the Bible. God is very particular about building a good army. You find Abraham. Abraham, you don't realize it at first. You just think he's a man out there, a rich man with a bunch of cattle and so forth, until you find Lot get in trouble. And then he arms 430 men. It says 430 men that he had trained, his servants, went to battle. Well, okay. Even he had an army. God intends an army. Now, a nation is not a nation if they're pacifists. There's not any world threat in Canada. Canada's got the wimpiest army we know. Okay. If you want to call it, I'm going to get a bunch of comments on this, I'm sure. Right. So, but if you've got a good army, that says something about your country. It does. You've got to be able to defend it and protect it, and you need a good army. So, in 2 Chronicles 14, verse 6. 2 Chronicles 14, verse 6. 2 Chronicles 14, 6. He says, and he built fenced cities in Judah, for the land had rest, and he had no war those years, because the Lord had given him rest. So he's using his time wisely. Therefore he said unto Judah, let us build these cities, and make about them walls and towers, gates, bars, while the land is yet before us. He said, let's do something, not just sit idle. That's a good leader. He said, we don't have a war going on right now. Let's do something. Let's prepare in case there is one. Let's make sure our cities are strong. Let's build some walls. What? Verse 8. And Asa had an army of men that bare targets and spears out of Judah, 300,000, and out of Benjamin that bare shields and drew bows 280,000. All these were mighty men of valor. So he was smart. He built his city, he built his kingdom, and he made sure the army was strong, even though he didn't need it right away. He had rest. God had given him rest. We need to do the same thing spiritually. There will be times in your life where you'll go through what seems like every second of every day it's a running gun battle spiritually between either your flesh or something that the world is beating you up with. And you're fight. And then you'll have a time of rest where it seems like, oh, good, nobody's after me. You know, I'm not having these overwhelming urges to get into one sin or the other. It'll be a time of rest. Same thing happens to Jesus. You find in Matthew chapter 4, he's led up of the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted of the devil. He's tempted for 40 days. It says at the end of that thing that the devil left him for a season. You'll find the same thing in your life. There will be times when the devil is attacking you hard, and then there will be seasons where he's not. In those seasons that he's not, we should be doing what Asa did, preparing for it, because it's not over. The battle's not done. Look at the northern kingdom, Nadab. That'll be in 1 Kings. I don't know what I'm doing with my notes here. Nadab. Nadab in the northern kingdom. Yes. 1 Kings 15:27. Nadab in the northern kingdom isn't going to last long. He's about to go down. Baasha ends up killing Nadab. Baasha is he has anarchy. Now there is no royal line in the north. In the south there's a royal line, just like we expect in England when what's that woman's name? The Queen, whatever her name is right now, Queen of England. What's her name? Elizabeth. Whenever she dies, we expect Charles to take over. I hope not, but he's a nutcase. But that's because there's a line of succession. The same with the South. However, in the North, they just made themselves king. So you better watch out, because there's not a family that's after you. It's everybody. Anybody powerful can come in and by force take the throne. So that was a scary predicament to be the king in the North, because anybody who wanted it could challenge it and make themselves king without having to worry about the family bloodline. And that's what happens here. 1 Kings 15, verse 27. And Baasha, the son of Ahijah of the house of Issachar, conspired against him, and Baasha smote him at Gibbethon, which belongeth to the Philistines, for Nadab and all Israel laid siege to Gibeon. Even in the 3rd year of Asa, king of Judah, did Baasha slay him and reigned in his stead. So he reigns by pure force. He says, I'm going to take that kingdom and I'm going to do it myself, and I'll be on the throne.
There are one that only reigned for 7 days.
Yeah, there's some short reigns in there. In 1 Kings 15:26. 1 Kings 15:26, talking about Nadab. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord, and walked in the ways of his father, and in the sins wherein he made Israel to sin. That's the reason. The reason is God wasn't protecting him. There's a great protection that we have. Just obeying, just doing what we're supposed to do, we get protection. Well, if God removes his hand of protection, you're open to anybody who wants to knock you off. It's scary. Look at it in 1 Kings 15:31. 1 Kings 15:31. Now the rest of the acts of Nadab and all that he did, are they not written in the books of the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel? You're going to keep seeing these references to the books of this, to the Chronicles of this, and it'll be books we don't have in the Bible. What you have here is you have somebody's going down and they've decided, I'm going to give you a chronology of the kings. That'll be 1st, 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Chronicles. And the way they do it is they're going down to the Library of Congress or whatever they've got, and they're pulling all the information from all these sources. And he's giving you the source information he used to compile what he's telling you. Now, it's not just a human doing it. It's God moving in him saying, write about this, write about that. You'll see there's, like in Asa, 41 years. Well, in 41 years, he's going to pick and choose what we learn about. There's many things in there we know that happened we don't know anything about. It had to be. But God picks and chooses what he wants us to know. All right. Okay. So we've got Asa in the south, and Nadab in the north. But Nadab's not going to reign long. Nadab is killed by Baasha. So Baasha takes the throne. So we've got Asa, we had Nadab, now we got Baasha. In 2nd Chronicles 14. 2nd Chronicles 14. This is an incident that's going to happen that really hasn't, it's not a correlation with north and south. It's just something that's going on in the south. 2nd Chronicles 14, verse 9. Asa is going to defeat an Ethiopian. 2nd Chronicles 14, 9. And there came out against them Zariah the Ethiopian, with an host of 1,000 and 300 chariots, and came unto Marshmallow, whatever that is. Then Asa went out against him, and they set the battle in array. That is, they got busy fighting. In the valley of Zephtha at Marshmallow. And Asa cried unto the Lord his God, and said, Lord, it is nothing with thee to help, whether with many or with them that have no power. He took note of what's going on. He said, look, we're about to get slaughtered here. Now, he's been doing right. He was cleaning up. Just because you clean up and you live right doesn't mean you're not going to have battles. It doesn't mean it's not going to look like you're going to be defeated. It did for this guy. He says, God, I know you. It's not any big deal to you. You can either save with a big army or with no army. Army is not the deciding factor. For we rest on thee, is what he says. This is our claim to use your authority. We're not depending on our army. We're resting on thee. And in thy name we go against this multitude. Ooh, now he made it personal to God. Your name is the one we use to go against this multitude. O Lord, thou art our God. Let not man prevail against thee. Wow, now that's a powerful prayer. He said, God, we're going up against these people, and we've told them that we're your servants, and we're doing this because you told us to, and I don't want to see anybody beat you. And it worked. Verse 12. So the Lord smote the Ethiopian before Asa and before Judah, and the Ethiopians fled. And Asa and the people that were with him pursued them unto Gerar. And the Ethiopians were overthrown, that they could not recover themselves, for they were destroyed. Verse 14. And they smote all the cities around about Gerar, for the fear of the Lord came upon them. God uses fear. We found early in the Old Testament, I believe it's in Deuteronomy and in Exodus, he says, if you'll fear me, I'll put my fear before you, and your enemies will turn from you. God uses fear. Now, we've got to experience it first. Just like in Romans, he says, don't preach to a man about a certain thing if you're involved in the same certain thing. Clean up yourself first. The same with God. God's the same way. He says, look, if you'll fear me, then I can use the fear for a weapon against your enemies. But if you don't fear me, you're going to fear somebody. I'll let it be your enemies. Verse 15. They smote also the tents of cattle, and carried away the sheep and camels in abundance, and returned to Jerusalem. Jerusalem's a good place to go back to. That's the place God has chosen to put his name. That's the place God's designed as my headquarters. And it's always going to be his headquarters. Even in the millennium, he's coming back, and Jerusalem is going to be his home city. That's going to be the spot. Azariah tells, this is a prophet, tells Asa and the nation to be faithful to God. He gets an encourager to come along and make sure he doesn't slip and go the wrong direction. That'll be in 2 Chronicles 15, verse 1. 2 Chronicles 15, verse 1. And the Spirit of God came upon Azariah, the son of Oded. And he went out to meet Asa and said unto him, Hear me, Asa, and all Judah and Benjamin. The Lord is with you, while ye be with him. And if you seek him, he will be found of you. Now, let's pretend it ended right there. He's saying, if you'll seek God, that's exactly what he wants. And if you'll be on his side, he'll be right there with you, and he'll help you. Now, that's a good news for us right now. If we'll pursue God, he'll be there to help us. He's not waiting until you prove yourself. All you have to prove is your desire. If your desire is for him, he's all for you. However, our verse didn't end. But if ye forsake him, he will forsake you. If you're going to claim the first half of the verse, you've got to claim the last half too. If you forsake God, expect to be forsaken. Verse 3. Now for a long season Israel hath been without a true God. This is the south. Or this is, the north. Talking about Israel, the north. The north has been without a true God. Yeah, they haven't. They've had golden calves. They haven't had God. And without a teaching priest. Yeah, they got rid of them all. And without law. All of those things are necessary in a Christian's life. You need God first of all. If you have all of these other things but you don't have God, you've got emptiness. It's fake. It's man-made. You start with God. So get your nose in the book and find out where he is, who he is. And then a teaching priest. For us, the Holy Spirit teaches us. We compare spiritual things with spiritual things. You find a verse over here, you got a question about what it means, you go find another one that talks about the same type thing, and you get teaching from the Holy Spirit. And without law, if you don't have the law, the rules of do this and don't do that, you'll be open to anarchy just like the rest of the world, and you won't know what you're supposed to do. It's not that God is trying to be mean and saying, you better do this and you better not do that. It's that we wouldn't know if he didn't tell us. Okay, so law is a good thing. It's a good thing when there's a speed limit sign. Not really, but it's good that there is a speed limit sign rather than them just being able to decide on a whim. Oh, I think you ought to be driving about 30. I'm going to give you a ticket. No, there's a sign up there that says this is what we expect. 30 miles an hour. God does the same thing. He gives us laws. Not to be mean and overbearing, but to tell us this is what I expect. That's good. Verse 4. But when they in their trouble turned to the Lord God of Israel and sought him, he was found of them. And in those times there was no peace to him that went out, nor to him that came in, but great vexations. Okay, that's just count on it. If you're not going to seek God, there's going to be great vexations. Expect life to be very difficult. Guess what? Life's difficult anyway. Forsake God and see difficulty 100% on your shoulders. However, if you've got God and He's for you, then when difficulty comes along, you've got a supernatural helper there that's bigger than you could ever imagine. But if you want to do it all on your own, forsake God. Go for it. Verse 7. Be ye strong, therefore, and let not your hands be weak. He said, be strong. After just telling him God's going to be the one who's going to watch out for you. Well, if God's doing all the watching out, why do I need to be strong? Because God requires work. He requires us to still be strong. He knows exactly what we can and can't do, and until we've done all we're capable of doing, He doesn't step in and do what only He can do. For your work shall be rewarded. Now that's a great thing. If you will be strong and you will do the things you know to do, and do 100% of them, and not be lazy and say, God, you come down here and fix it all. That's the standard thing the charismatic does, is they stomp their feet and they say, I declare and decree, God, you do this and you do that. God is not a genie that you can command around. He says right, yeah, He does the declaring and decreeing. He said right there, don't be weak, you be strong. Okay? So once you do what your strength can do, He will step in and do what needs to be done if you can't finish it. However, until we do what He's demanded of us, He's not going to do what only He can do. In the north, Baasha. Baasha takes the throne. Remember, he usurped the authority by killing the king that was on it before him, Nadab. By killing Nadab and all the house of Jeroboam. This fulfills a prophecy that had already been given. By destroying the house of Jeroboam. This is the first dynasty of the northern kingdom has been removed. In 1 Kings 15, verse 27. 1 Kings 15, 27. It says, and Baasha, the son of Ahijah of the house of Issachar, conspired against him, Nadab. He's going against Nadab. And Baasha smote him at Gibeon, which belongeth to the Philistines. Nadab and all Israel laid siege to Gibeon. Verse 28. Even in the 3rd year of King Asa of Judah did Baasha slay him and reigned in his stead. And it came to pass, when he reigned, that he smote all the house of Jeroboam. Okay, that's the whole line. He wants to make sure nobody's going to still be living that could claim the throne. So he cleans out the whole dynasty. He says, I'm going to set myself and my family up as the royal family. And he left not to Jeroboam any that breatheth. I think that's pretty plain. He killed them all. If you're not breathing, I'll leave you. Until he had destroyed him, according unto the saying of the Lord, which he spake by his servant Ahijah the Shilonite. What is it? Shilonite. That guy. So Baasha is coming to the throne by evil means. The whole north is evil. It's just wicked. You're going to see that the north, you don't want to be any part of the northern kingdom. Now the south, it's a good kingdom. It's got the line that God said is going to be the kingly line. And every now and then you'll see a king like Asa step up there and start doing right. And you'll see God give favor and do great things for them. But it's few and far between, even with the people that are the chosen. Even with the royal line God declared from the beginning, this is going to be the line. That's Christians. That's us today. We are the only ones that have His favor, period. His favor is on anybody who's in His Son. But we can shirk His favor just by our actions, just like they did in the north.